All right, folks, it is my pleasure today as Victoria is traveling to do our interview with a guest, our spiritual guest interview. So I'm going to let you know who's coming on up, and then we are going to have a little conversation here, which I think is going to be quite fascinating because I have known Lisa's work for quite some time and am actually really excited about the auspiciousness of getting to talk to her today. Internationally known for her work in animal ethics, Dr. Kemmerer is the founder of the information sharing nonprofit Tapestry. Dr. Kemmerer, or Dr. K to many, holds a BA in International Studies, a Master of Theological Studies in Comparative Religions, and a Ph.D. in Philosophy with a focus on animal ethics. So you'll see how those things entwine. She taught ethics and religious studies in Montana for 20 years and has written more than 100 articles, anthology chapters, and 13 books, many of which I know are on our shelves here at the Compassion Consortium and probably some of yours as well. Dr. Kemmerer retired in 2020 to become a full-time social justice activist. Her book, Animals and the Environment, Advocacy, Activism, and the Quest for Common Ground, was especially helpful for me on reflecting how to search for common ground when considering the health and well-being of individual animals, species, habitats, and ecosystems. And I picked up some very useful ideas for how to reach into those places where animal advocates and planetary activists can feel ideological tension sometimes, to find conversations that widen the viewpoint to include all the stakeholders. She's written a lot of useful books for animal activists exploring interspecies concerns in a particular religion or across in comparative religious studies. And so I'm absolutely delighted to have Dr. K or Lisa Kemmerer, however we refer to this human, with us today. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. What a beautiful service so far. And I have heard so much about your work as well. So I've met so many of your students. So it's very nice to be here on a lot of counts.
I feel like we should sing It's a Small World. So perhaps our next song of compassion will be "It's a Small World." All right, so I'd like to ask you this perhaps irreverent question to ask of a accomplished scholar, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Before we get into talking about your work, can you give us a little insight into pre-scholarly Lisa? Like, were you that little kid playing in the mud studying toads? Or were you the one with your nose buried in a book in the library reading Corner? Or someone else? Tell us about pre-scholarly Lisa.
I'd argue that I'm not a scholar. I'm an activist.
Pre-activist Lisa.
And
Or were you always an
there
activist?
was no pre-activist Lisa. Yes. So for me, I was someone who thought a lot, and I was very much a hands-on person. So I was definitely out in the mud. I was not a book person. I was definitely one with hands-on who just liked to also just stand back and where humans were concerned, I spent a lot of time just standing back watching.
Fascinating. Okay. So seems like this was with you from the very, very beginning, this kind of desire to look at these topics. When did you come to decide that interspecies relations were something you needed to start writing about or start attending to academically and teaching about? How did that happen?
Well, nothing happens very fast with me. It's always a process of fits and starts, and I don't, it's never intentional. So I couldn't even say when or how that happened. I would say that it was a natural to go from the hands-on, from an activist who liked to sit around and think, becoming a teacher seemed like the right thing to get that activism out into the world. And to be a teacher, you have to write. You have to write. You have to publish to teach. So I think that's how it happened.
So across decades now, you've written extensively,
Yes,
extensively.
I've taken to it like a fish to water, and it's because I've really realized that that's how you reach people is you put something out there and hope for the best with it. And so writing's become one of the ways that I try very hard. I have a niche now. I have something that needs to be done. I found something that needs doing that I could do, and so I do it.
All right, so let's dig into it for a little bit. Let's spend some time looking at what you've discovered. So you've observed what's kind of helpful in some of our religious and philosophical systems and what's intensely harmful. And you found a lot of things, observed a lot of things, written a lot of things. And so I encourage folks to definitely pick up a couple books if what we're talking about here piques your interest, ongoing. But what have been a couple of your biggest surprises? Will you tell us a little bit about those surprises and how they have come to be in your work?
I would say that I was interested in religions. I remember my earliest days pondering what people believed and why they believed it and being fascinated by it and drawn to it. And then as I grew, I became more interested in the intersection between what we ought to do and what we weren't doing, and looking at, and somehow I figured out the importance of texts, and I found out that in those texts was a whole lot of things that people didn't seem to know about, and a whole lot of things that weren't very important that they knew a whole lot about. And so that they would quickly bring up things that were of very little relevance to the actual text, but they'd use it to defend something that for the world and humanity and animals, it's not a good thing. So those things really got my interest and focused me on looking at the positives in religions and what we could learn from that. And I think for me, I came to understand that if there's a good thing, if there's an ethic that's taught across religious traditions, it's just a whole nother level of what it doesn't matter if which religion you're from or if you're an atheist or if you're an agnostic. It doesn't really matter. If every religion's teaching that, there's got to be something there to look at. And that seemed very important to me.
And as you were doing that, was there anything that are there any kind of examples you can give us? Like you've written about so many different religions, but give us a peek into some of the things that you've discovered. I
You all
noticed
know
that you
them.
said we could actually talk about you just pronounced the word animal,
Mhm.
which some folks here might have noticed or picked up on. What is that about?
So animal is my way of being honest, and language is so important. We use language to hide things, to further an agenda, to keep power, to put others down. And that's why we talk about animal. It has a negative connotation in much of the culture, the way it's used, like beast. And so for me, I'm an animal and I know it. And so animal is every other species other than the speaker. So a parrot could say it, or a chimp could sign animal. And it means every other species except them. So I'm trying to use a word that keeps me honest and doesn't pretend when I say animal that I'm just talking about all the other species, because I'm not. I'm an animal. So animal is it takes care of that for me. And it's also so much easier to write than non-human animal or other, which is othering to others, other animal. I don't want to other. So that's the reason.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating one because we struggle with that. With the idea of non-human persons is one of the ones that always, kind of gets in pokes me a little bit. I remember Franz de Waal said that he would correct his students when they said non-human persons and tell them if they were going to say non-human, they should also say non-penguin and non-tiger and non right to add those different kind of things in. But we struggle with this kind of lexical thing of other than human being, um, animal, human animal, and I struggle with it in my writing. I have tried to use the animal as well and have used it on a number of occasions. I had to make spell check, learn it. So that I had to teach spell check what Lisa knew um, to to do that. But how do you find when you add that concept for people when you describe that? Is it something that sticks? Is it something that you get pushback on?
I think it's very hard. For me, I use it mostly for writing, which is very easy. But it's very hard when you're speaking because once you've learned language, it's reflexive. You don't think about it, you just do it. But I think that whenever we use animal incorrectly, those of us who really recognize who we are and who other beings are, you've got to feel that it's just not right. It's a deception, and it's meant to be. And I think once you understand that language is purposeful, it has an intent. And just like all the other ways that we make it look like it's okay for us to put ourselves above and manipulate and exploit other beings, language does that too. It reaffirms the status quo. So I want nothing to do with it. So I have to come up, and there's more than one place where I just have to figure out a new way of saying something. And for me, this one's particularly important.
Which religion did you start studying first when you
Well,
started this
probably the
journey?
one biggest in my country, right? Christianity. But you can't start studying Christianity without studying Judaism because they share the same text. And then you've already got to start on Islam because they share many of the books from the Hebrew Bible as well, Hebrew Bible being the Old Testament. So I was off and started, but by the time I was supposed to go off to college, I realized that I really wanted to do some broader learning. And I wanted, it was very, when I realized that I headed to Asia with a backpack when I was a kid, I worked all summer in the woods and came out and took my money and bought a ticket and headed for Asia. I was after those religions. I wanted to be around them and learn about them and study them. And I still have the book on world religions that I bought in India. So, I would say that it started with Christianity because that's what was around me. But what fascinated me was that tendency as a child to stand back and watch and just ponder and wonder. I'll never forget I was with my sister's friends on an overnight when I couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, maybe a little older, but not much. Young grade school, and watching them do their evening prayers. And I was just fascinated. I was just like, wow, this is just, I just like, they're reading some things here in scripture, and I'm thinking, seriously, are they going to take that just straightforward right off the text as it is? Are they thinking about how that all works together? And I was just a child, and I was starting to look critically at these texts and realize that something was amiss. Something was very amiss. And of course, it isn't in the texts. It's in humans, and of course, the texts also come from humans. We have to be honest about that too. What we've written down comes through the human hand and then through many human hands. So for me, the challenge with that child who had that strong spiritual inclination was very drawn to really ethics at the core of it. I wanted to know how I should live. I wanted to know how to be a good person. And I couldn't find it wherever I looked. And so I had to look for myself more deeply across faiths.
There's sometimes something that I observe among people who are interested in animals, that kind of the rejection of anything religious due to some sort of hurt or their understanding of what a particular sacred text says or what an organization has said or what a spiritual figure in leadership has said. And so there's kind of a none of that for me, thank you very much. How is that something that you come across?
Oh, all
And
the
is it
time.
and is it something that you feel as a person who has studied all of these religions and kind of looked at them so deeply? Is it something that you feel that you need to address, or is it something where you're kind of like, okay, yeah, not for you, but the people who are, come and talk to me?
It is absolutely something I feel I need to address and address all the time in my writing. And the book, Animals and World Religions, and the most recent one, Animals and Christianity, Animals and Judaism, and I want to do one on each faith. The point of those books is to help people stay in their faith tradition and recognize the beauty of it. And I think we don't ever need to change faith traditions, and we certainly don't need to reject our faith tradition because a minister or a group of people fails in their compassion. And I think, it's very painful. I will never forget some of my young days in a church, hearing a minister who just clearly didn't get it. It's hard for me to sit there and take it. And I'd always go talk to them afterwards. But how much can they really understand? They're in their tradition, and it's all they've ever learned. You can't blame them. So that we have to stay in our traditions for a couple of reasons. One is we need that nurturance. We need that connection to something beyond ourselves. We are, our lives go better when we understand and draw on the larger connections and interconnections of life. And the other reason is you can't bring change once you've left your tradition. So if there's something you don't like and you walk off, seriously? Is that okay? I mean, I can get that sometimes we need to protect ourselves, but we have to work for the right and the good. It doesn't happen naturally in our lives or in the larger world. So we have to stay in our faith tradition and stay connected with those people that nurtured us when they were young and help nurture them back as we grow and learn, sharing our own understanding with them as they have with us. I think that's part of growing and changing and being a person that's connected to something more than ourselves.
So how has, well, first of all, I couldn't agree with you more. But that is not the point, of course, for us to agree, but for us to explore. So how has studying religion through the lens of the animal activism, because again, you're an activist as well as a knowledge person here. How has it shaped you or affected you as an activist?
Ask again, please. Which part? My
Yeah.
study? How has my study affected my
How
activism?
how has studying religion through this lens of animal activism shaped
Yes.
you or affected you as an activist or a person in general?
Studying religions with my particular sensitivity to nature and animals, really anything or anyone oppressed, it's deeply in me to notice it and to care about it. And so studying religions, and I actually came upon a book in my room the other day. I'm thinking, I got two of these, should give one to someone else. And then I opened it. And this is the book I hadn't looked at since I was very young. And there it was marked. There was a little flag and it had a women mark. Was looking at text and trying to understand the position of women in society. And so, and I remember starting to notice these things. So studying religions was essential to my holding on to them. Looking at what's really there will reaffirm any kindness, any compassion, any tenderness, any caring. And once you hear that, you're like, oh yeah, well, of course it will. I mean, it's common sense. But when you're surrounded by a society that doesn't get it, it can drive you away. It can hurt you. It can destroy your faith. And so looking carefully at texts for me was a way of keeping spirituality or religion or however you want to look at it alive in my life, alive and functional, well and working, and also of being the best activist I could be. So I feel really strongly there is no better avenue than religion for reaching people. And I have experienced it. I cannot say it strongly enough. When you meet someone who is a person of faith, you have them. They can't say, I don't care. If you understand their texts, and this is the other reason I studied them, then when you meet someone who says, oh, Genesis says we can eat animals, using the wrong term, then you can say, ha, but did you know? And you're off and going. And you can change hearts. And as a teacher, I taught in Montana. You won't find any more conservative population probably than I lived with in Montana for 20 years. It works. Because they were sincere in their faith. When I would show them and tell them what's actually written in the text, it would bring real change in their lives.
So you're speaking to someone in their own language.
Yes, in their own language and in their own faith base. I mean, they want to be the best Christian that they can be, but you have to understand the text. And that's the whole point of much of the writing that I've done in the series that I'm working now. So for our purposes, animals and Judaism and animals and Christianity, it goes through and looks at the arguments and the responses, what people will say and what the obvious arguments are. And again, that's the philosopher me, and my brain was like that from a child, looking logically and giving reasoned responses. So for me, studying and putting that together with faith and then writing and that being activism, you can see how it goes full circle and it's all connected.
So as we wrap ourselves here, I've got two more kind of important questions, I think, for you, Lisa. The first is, what are the challenges for you? What do you face in your work? Because we are a community of folks who are facing challenges in our work, and that's why we gather, to support each other, to share, to be able
Mhm.
to not feel alone or isolated or have people listen to us. What challenges do you face?
Isolation, definitely. I spend all my time looking at texts and writing, and I do love my world of aloneness. I love my world of writing with my dogs and my cats and the quietness of nature where I live. But I really long for a community in place, at hand, here. And I have one friend, but I have a couple others that are, people that I consider definitely to be my friends. I can think of two that I like to spend time with at least. But the online world doesn't work for me. I'm too old fashioned for that, I guess. I need my friends to say, hey, let's go for a walk. Let's go out and eat some peas in the garden. Let's let's brush our dogs together. Hey, want to hold the cats with me? I mean, to me, that's a friend, is somebody right here at hand. And after I know a friend that way, then I definitely stay in touch with them online because we have that connection. But so for me, that's a challenge. And I would also say that just the suffering that over a lifetime of being an activist, the pain, the accumulative pain in PTSD from instances, from things I've seen, and from being somebody that would tendency to just watch things and not know what to do in the human world. Others would be very inclined to just step forward and do something, but I would often, especially when younger, watch things, just watch and not know what to do. And that has a traumatic effect over time.
So, how do you attend to that? Are there any practices that you use to help you stay grounded, to work with that trauma, to increase your resiliency, or are there things that you've pulled from the religions you've studied, or are there personal practices you have?
Mm. Thank you for mentioning the religions I've studied. I love to read poetry. And also a part of that, I include texts right in that. Texts from all over the world, they're scriptural writings. I include those. But the number one thing I do is I have dogs and cats, and I cuddle them and I love them and I appreciate them. And my doggies need a walk every day and they get me out into the world. And I walk every day, and it's when I think I'm out in nature, it's healthy. It is invariably, I would say, probably my happiest time every day. And I don't care what the weather is. When I get done, I get up, I get my butt in the chair and I do some work because that's essential to what I need to do. And then the doggies, out we go. And then for the rest of the day, cats and dogs, and try to get other things done. But that time outside, I just find nature very healing. It affirms the interconnectedness. It reminds me of my smallness and whatever pains I have, how small they are, and how big and beautiful the world is.
Wonderful. Well, Lisa, you are always welcome here with us if you feel like coming into the digital community, the digital corridor. We have been so grateful for your time with us today. Folks, I will put Lisa's link in the chat so you can check out her books, her articles, her information. You can find her all over the place. And so hopefully, if this has been intriguing to you and you'd like to learn more specificity about what she has found and observed in the world's religions and wisdom traditions, you'll be able to do so. Thank you so much for your time with us.
Thank you so much. And blessings to all of you and Victoria as well.